Smoke clears but not the story. In Askew, born into Lincolnshire's genteel circles, transformed quiet privilege into a battleground of the soul. Forced into marriage at 15, her heart found freedom in Scripture. When her devout Protestant convictions collided with her Catholic husband's world, she violated every expectation, refusing to be silenced. From this collision sprang a relentless faith and a journey toward martyrdom. Based on her biography and early life's religious conflict, she was born into comfort in Lincolnshire's rolling countryside around 1521. Daughter of the respected Sir William Askew, but the faith she embraced would shatter any claim that England's gentility shielded her. From the earliest age, Askew found her dearest solace, not in courtly privilege, but in the liberated words of Scripture. She read it voraciously, memorizing verses with the quiet confidence of someone who knew her mind was her own had. You known her when she was 15, a bright, literate young woman, perhaps smiling, dutiful, obedient. You might not imagine the storm that awaited. Yet, at that tender age, she was forced into a marriage with Thomas Kyme, the fiancé meant for her older sister Martha, who died before they could wed the substitute bride. In name only, Anne slipped into that union with borrowed vows, instantly wrestling with the burden of a faith she held dear, but he could neither understand nor abide. Thomas, a devout Catholic, recoiled at Anne's refusal to stay silent. She read her English Bible aloud. She quietly but unmistakably rejected Catholic rituals, confession, mass, transubstantiation. She found their truth only in the pages she studied herself. He tried to shut her down. Stop reading the Bible, he demanded, or leave. She refused. When a woman's faith became an offense, that was the moment Anne shed the constraints of domestic tranquility. She left home, resolute, though still with people who sought to tether her. She used her maiden name, Askew, as a shield. As a bold claim to spiritual autonomy, she journeyed to London, the city of restless ideas, where Protestant voices gathered. Allies such as John Lascelles, Edward Crome, and clergy connected to the Queen herself, Catherine Parr, welcomed her intellect and passion and didn't merely camouflage herself among reformers. She preached, she debated, she wielded Scripture like a weapon, calmly dismantling arguments against her faith. Her opponents were incensed, unaccustomed to a woman who quoted the Bible so fluently, who faced interrogators with grace. When pressed on complex doctrines like the Eucharist, she responded with piercing clarity. God is spirit, not a wafer cake, she declared, her voice unwavering in the face of ecclesiastical rage. Slowly, the machinery of power creaked into motion. She was arrested, interrogated, then released twice. Her resolve only hardened. Quiet conformity had always been the norm for women, but in Askew knew another path. She refused to recede, and just like that, the stage was set, a spark that the tower would soon seize. And a daring woman whose voice threatened the very structures of faith and power in Tudor England. Imagine the cold stones of the Tower of London. One of her bones already unhinged, and Askew lies naked on the rack. She is one of only 2 women ever tortured there. Yet, even as Lord Chancellor Wriothesley and Sir Richard Rich personally turned the wheels, wrenching her joints from their sockets, she refused to betray a single friend. Her silent defiance echoed more powerfully than any confession. She lay on the rack in the Tower of London, a chamber of unimaginable horror reserved for only the most defiant souls. Not even prison walls held her captive, but flesh and bone torn by those who demanded betrayal. In June 1546, Askew found herself dragged into the heart of political desperation, accused not just of heresy, but of threatening the fragile alliances of Henry VIII's reign. Her crime, relentlessly clinging to Scripture and refusing to betray fellow believers, even under torture. She was, alongside Margaret Chain, one of only 2 women known to have endured such brutality within the tower's ancient stones. They brought her to the blank-eyed rack, that grim instrument designed to drag confession from the most unwilling. The rack lay silent until they hauled her barristed onto its frame. Her ankles and wrists were chained. The wheel began its merciless turn, stretching her limbs, pulling joints from sockets, bone grinding against bone. She fainted, then revived. The torment was repeated, constantly, and still she remained, silent even. The lieutenant man charged with overseeing the tower could bear no more of her screams echoing in the courtyard. He stepped away, seeking the king's pardon for himself. Yet Anne's torturers did not relent. Lord Chancellor Thomas Wriothesley and Sir Richard Rich, wielding power like twisted instruments, turned the handles themselves. They pulled so fiercely she cried out. Her shoulders, hips, elbows, knees forced from their sockets, leaving her in a state few alive have endured. Her silence broke no ceilings but shattered assumptions. They asked for names of women, of her allies, perhaps even Queen Catherine Parr. Anne refused. Not one name escaped her. In her own words, because I lay still and did not cry. My Lord Chancellor and Master Rich took pains to rack me with their own hands till I was nigh dead. Her voice, even broken, held a defiance that reverberated beyond those damp stones. She was returned to her cell, her body a mosaic of agony, but her resolve was undiminished. She recorded the ordeal, her examinations the only first-hand female account of trial and torture in Henrician or Marian England in those pages. She would later claim, "I would rather die than break my faith." It was not rhetoric, it was living testament. This was no random act of cruelty. During the final years of Henry's rule, conservatives waged a campaign of desperation targeting reformers, even pressing Anne to implicate powerful figures close to the Queen. Her arrest and torture were part of a broader strategy to protect religious tradition by rooting out reformist voices in. She was a sharp thorn in their side in that with Gruesome and Askew's pain became her power. It was a grim turning point, where faith and flesh collided, and where a woman's unwavering conviction turned her into a martyr. Broken and bloodied, unable to stand, Anne is carried through jeering crowds to Smithfield, draped only in her shift and chained to the stake. She watches Bishop Shaxton preach one final sermon. When his words falter from Scripture, she interrupts. There he misseth, and speaketh without the book. In that moment, the power of her belief outshone the blaze that would soon consume her. Her body, broken by the rack, was beyond bearing even the lightest step. The pain that pulsed through every bone made standing impossible. Yet in that instant, the enormity of her choices, the cost of her convictions, crystallized into an unshakable purpose. On July 16, 1546, an Askew was carried to Smithfield in a simple wooden chair, her shift the only garment she wore. As London looked on in morbid fascination, the procession moved through streets that had once heard only her preaching. Now, they bore witness to her martyrdom, her fragile figure borne aloft by strangers' hands. Upon arriving, Anne was chained to the stake by the waist drawn, as if by cruel design, into a posture of forced resignation, even as her spirit remained defiantly upright and secured there with chains at her ankles, knees, chest, and neck, while officials loomed in their finery, including the Lord Chancellor, the Dukes of Norfolk and Bedford, and the Lord Mayor. Seated on a dais, the faithful Bishop Nicholas Shaxton, who had once been a close associate, ascended a pulpit to deliver the final sermon, urging recantation and mercy. Anne, though racked by pain, listened with measured intensity. She offered muted assent when he spoke Scripture faithfully, but when his words faltered under doctrinal error, she did not hesitate. There he misseth and speaketh without the book. The public hush in that moment was electric, as her clarity pierced the religious pageantry around her. Then came the final mercy of mercy, one could call it, as the flames licked toward her. A bag of gunpowder was carried around her body, an executioner's grim kindness intended to hasten her death and spare her agony. Yet even amid roaring fire, the infernal spectacle could not obscure the integrity of her faith. She refused to flinch, refused to recant, refusing even to glance at the pardon that had been offered, saying simply that she had not come to deny my Lord and Master. Flames rose, and the day's heat swelled into a living cruelty. Some accounts say she held on silently until fire reached her chest. Others that the gunpowder brought a quick release, but all agree on her unyielding courage. A final act as piercing as any sermon in that moment. And Askew's agonies transformed into testament. The crowd recoiled as smoke curled upward, but the memory of her defiance endured. In death, she asserted that truth was made, not through compromise, but through endurance. From her ashes rose a legacy. Her martyrdom would resonate across generations, echoing in the pages of Foxe's Book of Martyrs, where her story and her unbroken faith would inspire countless others to stand firm in the fires of conviction. The flames have died, but the words endure. And Askew's raw and unfiltered examinations, published immediately after her death, and later canonized in Foxe's Book of Martyrs, did what no execution could. They gave her a voice across the generations. From the embers of betrayal and anguish rose a legacy of courage, carved in ink and faith, shaping the Protestant identity of England. Even as the smoke settled over Smithfield and the embers cooled, the story of an Askew refused to die. Body may have burned, yet her voice, transmitted through her own words, blazed brighter than any pyre. Within weeks of her death, her examinations, the raw first-person account of her ordeal and convictions, began to circulate. John Bale published it immediately after her martyrdom, albeit heavily annotated and shaped to serve as Protestant polemic. But the core of her testimony, a woman's unflinching spiritual integrity, pierced through his editorial framing. Later, in 1563, John Foxe incorporated her story into his monumental Octus and Monuments, better known as Foxe's Book of Martyrs, a text that would go on to define Protestant identity in England for centuries to come. The examinations didn't just relay Anne's questions and answers under scrutiny, they reclaimed a platform for a woman's intellect and faith to be heard where silence was expected. In a time when women were urged to submit and argued Scripture with confidence, quoting chapter and verse and refusing ambiguity, her defiance folded into every line. Though Bale cast her as a weak vessel of the Lord, her very words revealed something more radical, a storms of inner strength, theological clarity, and moral audacity. Foxe's retelling positioned her as an immortal exemplar of Protestant fortitude. His Book of Martyrs became the second most influential book in English religious life after the Bible. It's self-mandated for purchase by every parish and chained alongside scripture in churches across the realm. By 1571, through this dominant narrative, Anne's suffering became not just a personal agony, but a foundational symbol of the New English Church, resilient, truth-driven, and willing to burn for conscience's sake. Historians today remain captivated by that fiercely defiant spirit. Modern scholars continue to reclaim Anne's authentic voice, separating what she actually wrote from the editorial brushstrokes of Bale and Foxe. Her words offer one of the earliest known examples of an Englishwoman wielding the pen and Bible as power. They see her not merely as a martyr, but as a pioneering writer, a dissident thinker, and a beacon of courage that transcended her era. And Askew's legacy endures because she refused to bow to husband, council, church, or throne. She burned at 25, but her words outlived centuries of doctrinal battles, shaping the Protestant imagination of England and beyond. Her story reminds us that persecution can amplify truth rather than extinguish it, that a single voice, bold and unwavering, can echo through generations. If this tale moved you, please like, subscribe, and share so more people can hear the defiance and faith of an Askew, England's most unbreakable martyr.